At around 20 to 4 in the afternoon on the 28th of January 2025, two vehicles collided head-on near Princetown on the Great Ocean Road. A 46-year-old woman from Hampton East and a 35-year-old woman from China died at the scene. A 16-year-old girl and two other passengers were taken to hospital with injuries that were not life-threatening. Almost a year later, a 50-year-old man was charged with 2 counts of dangerous driving, causing death over the crash. Only a fortnight before that Princetown crash, on the 10th of January 2025, a van and a car collided head-on on a nearby road just north of Woolsthorpe, in the same southwest Victorian region, and passers-by dragged 2 people from the burning wreckage. A 42-year-old man from Caramoot died, and 2 others were flown to Melbourne hospitals with serious injuries. Local reporters covering the region noted that 5 people died on southwest Victorian roads in just 19 days that January, compared with none over the same period the year before, a spike serious enough to prompt its own local investigation, and still barely mentioned outside the towns directly affected. It barely made a ripple outside the local paper. No national headlines, no viral thread, no lasting conversation about the road itself. Just another short item in a regional newspaper, filed alongside the football scores and the weather. That silence is the actual subject of this video, because that crash was not unusual, and neither was the silence that followed it. This is why nobody talks about how many people die on the Great Ocean Road. The Great Ocean Road runs for roughly 243 kilometers along the southeastern coast of Victoria, from Torquay near Geelong to Alensford, just outside Warrnambool, and it is, without much argument, one of the most photographed strips of road on Earth, drawing more than 6 million domestic and international visitors in a single recent year. It carries you past the surf beaches of the Surf Coast, the Split Point Lighthouse at Aireys Inlet, the timber-framed holiday towns of Lorne and Apollo Bay, and finally the limestone stacks of the 12 Apostles rising out of the Southern Ocean in Port Campbell National Park. It is routinely ranked among the greatest coastal drives in the world. What almost never makes it into that description is that this same road has been quietly killing people, in ones and twos, for the better part of a century. And the reasons nobody really talks about it turn out to be almost as revealing as the road itself. There is a bitter irony buried in that silence, because the Great Ocean Road is not simply a scenic drive. It is officially the largest war memorial on the planet. Construction began on the 19th of September 1919, when roughly 3,000 returned Australian soldiers, many of them physically and psychologically scarred by the First World War, began carving a road out of sheer coastal cliff face by hand, using picks, shovels, wheelbarrows, and explosives at a rate of about 3 kilometers a month. Several of those workers were killed during construction itself. The project took 13 years to finish, finally opening to a huge crowd in Lorne on the 26th of November, 1932, built and paid for as a living memorial to the more than 60,000 Australians who never came home from the war. The route was added to the Australian National Heritage List in 2011 in recognition of both its historical significance and its natural beauty. Today, the most photographed single spot on the entire route is the Memorial Arch near Eastern View, a timber gateway built in 1939 specifically to honor those returned servicemen. A monument to the dead that millions of tourists now drive straight through every year, mostly without knowing that the road itself has quietly kept adding names to its own unofficial toll ever since. That modern toll has never been dramatic in the way a single mass casualty disaster is dramatic, and that, more than anything else, seems to be exactly why it stays so quiet. Research covering the mid-1980s through the mid-1990s recorded an average of roughly 60 casualty crashes a year along the route. A more recent 5-year study examining crashes between November 2014 and August 2019 found 71 crashes in which someone was killed or seriously injured, including 4 deaths and 83 people seriously injured and taken to hospital. None of those figures describe a single event large enough to dominate a news cycle. They describe a slow, steady drip, a crash every few weeks, somewhere along 243 kilometers of cliffside road, each one significant to the people involved and almost invisible to everyone else. A significant share of that toll involves people who do not know the road at all. Data covering 2014 to 2018 found that around 20% of recorded crashes involved international visitors, and a further 10.5% involved interstate drivers, meaning roughly a third of all crashes on the route involve someone unfamiliar with driving on the left, unfamiliar with a rental car's controls, and often unfamiliar with the idea of a public road that narrows to a single tight lane along an unguarded cliff edge. Local bus drivers who travel the route for a living have described witnessing several near-miss incidents caused by international drivers on a single return trip, comparing the daily commute to a genuine game of chance, and arguing that at least some of the responsibility sits with rental car companies handing unfamiliar drivers the keys to a vehicle on one of the most demanding roads in the country, with minimal preparation. One regional councillor, whose local government area covers a 50-kilometer stretch of the route, went on record warning that a major crash involving multiple deaths felt inevitable rather than merely possible. A warning delivered years before the events of January 2025. Picture the drive the way the vast majority of visitors actually experience it. From Torquay, the road hugs the coast, past Bell's Beach and Anglesey, narrowing and tightening as it climbs around Ares Inlet, before dropping into Lorne, a popular overnight stop where the road briefly widens again. From there, it becomes genuinely demanding, clinging to cliffs above Wye River and Separation Creek, a section prone enough to landslides that Vic Roads has had to install steel railing and rockfall netting along the adjoining walking tracks, just to keep pedestrians safe from the same unstable slopes threatening the road itself. Beyond Apollo Bay, the route climbs inland through the Otway Ranges rainforest before rejoining the coast near Princetown and running past Loch Ard Gorge and the 12 Apostles, arguably the most crowded and most distracting few kilometers on the entire route, where visitors are actively encouraged to slow down, pull over, and photograph a genuinely spectacular coastline, sometimes only moments before merging back into fast-moving through traffic. It is precisely this combination of narrow lanes, blind curves, steep, unprotected drop-offs, and a constant stream of visitors trying to drive and sightsee at the same time that has produced the route's worst crashes for decades. Some of the most serious incidents have involved tour buses rather than rental cars. In July 2014, a woman died and a man was critically injured when a bus carrying Korean nationals crashed near Princetown. In April 2017, one person died and 8 others were injured when a bus carrying Taiwanese nationals crashed near Apollo Bay. In both cases, the vehicles involved were carrying large groups of visitors on tightly scheduled day trips, often promoted by international travel agencies as a single day combining the Great Ocean Road with attractions hours away, leaving very little margin for a tired driver navigating unfamiliar cliffside roads at speed. Authorities have specifically flagged winter afternoons as a particular risk, when reduced daylight hours mean visitors are sometimes still speeding between Apollo Bay and the 12 Apostles as darkness closes in, trying to fit a full day's sightseeing into a shrinking window of usable light. The danger is not confined to the route itself. In 1919, on a feeder road connecting to the Great Ocean Road near Mount Moriac, 5 members of a Chinese family were hospitalized, one in a critical condition, after their hire car reportedly failed to stop at a giveaway sign and collided with a truck, part of what local police described at the time as a string of similar crashes involving overseas drivers unfamiliar with the wider road network feeding into the tourist route. The road's other permanent residents pay their own price for all of this. Along an 8-kilometer stretch near Marengo, just outside Apollo Bay, local wildlife carers recorded 30 native animals killed by vehicles in a little over a year, including koalas, joeys, wallabies, possums, and echidnas, on a section where the speed limit rises from 60 kilometers an hour in the township to 100 kilometers an hour almost immediately beyond it. Campaigners have spent close to a decade pushing for that limit to be permanently lowered, pointing to independent research showing that cutting a road's speed limit by just 10 kilometers an hour can reduce collisions by roughly 20%, for a total added travel time of under 3 minutes across the stretch in question. Authorities have responded to all of this, but almost entirely in pieces, rather than through any single, unified overhaul. Vic Roads and its successor agencies have installed more than 100 multilingual drive on left signs along the route, added a digital message board near Princetown Road, specifically warning visitors heading back from the 12 Apostles, and temporarily dropped the speed limit near the Apostles themselves from 80 down to 20 kilometers an hour during peak periods, such as Chinese New Year, when visitor numbers have topped 128,000 in a single fortnight. Funded through Victoria's Towards Zero Road Safety program, engineers have carried out targeted works at specific black spots, new retaining walls, repaired pedestrian barriers, resurfaced sections, and rebuilt bridges, alongside broader rehabilitation works on the feeder roads that funnel traffic onto the main route. What none of this amounts to is a genuine redesign of the road itself. The Great Ocean Road remains, by both engineering necessity and heritage protection, essentially the same narrow, 2-lane cliffside route that 3,000 returned soldiers carved out of solid rock a century ago. Now carrying a volume and mix of traffic those men could never have imagined. Tour buses and rental sedans and cyclists and koalas all sharing the same handful of narrow meters between rock face and ocean drop. That, in the end, may be the real answer to why nobody talks about how many people die here. There is no single villain to blame, no one collapsed bridge, or one catastrophic pileup to anchor a headline. There is only a slow, decades-long accumulation of individually small, locally reported tragedies, spread across dozens of curves and townships along 243 kilometers of a road that the entire tourism industry has every incentive to keep photographing rather than interrogating. A road built to honor the dead has never fully stopped quietly making more of them. And it has done so for so long, so gradually, that an entire industry built around its beauty has simply learned to look past it. If you are ever the one making this drive, treat every blind curve as though something is coming the other way. Because on this road, statistically, sometimes it is. Slow down. Well before the lookouts, not at them. Do not attempt this route exhausted at the end of a long touring day. And if you are hiring a car for the first time on the wrong side of the road you grew up on, give yourself far more time and far more patience than any itinerary is telling you that you need. If this story changed the way you'll approach that drive next time, please like and subscribe.